What's up, this is EasyOSX, and welcome to the first video in a series on how to use iMovie. iMovie is of course the free video editing program that Apple includes with all its Mac computers. If you don't already have it, you can of course go to the App Store, search iMovie, and download it here, but it typically comes free on all Mac computers to begin with. Now, iMovie is of course not the only or even the most powerful video tool for Mac. You have things like Final Cut Pro, Adobe Premiere Pro, even Premiere Essentials. But because it's free and is already on the Mac, it's a great starting tool, and by itself, iMovie is actually a pretty solid video editor. So if you're looking to get started with video editing and you already have iMovie, this is going to show you how to get started with it over this entire series. This first video is going to cover just the most basic essentials. We're going to start off by showing you how to organize video and audio, how to get it into iMovie, some very basic editings, namely trimming, cutting, and moving stuff around in the iMovie timeline, and then how to render your video. Future videos will cover more specific and more powerful features. So to get started, let's go ahead and open iMovie. Now initially when you open iMovie, you'll likely be greeted with the Projects tab. You can see up here there's the Media and the Projects tab, and we're going to focus on the Projects tab. So the Projects tab kind of shows you all the, projects, all the different videos that you're editing or the different ones that you're working on at a time. You can of course search for them based off whatever you've named them, and you can even just kind of modify them to say, or modify the view to say what's the most recent ones, what's in a particular iMovie library if you actually have multiple, and even what's been modified within a certain time range. So we're going to start off with a new iMovie project. Hit Create New, and you'll be given the option to either open a movie or a trailer. The trailer is kind of more like kind of a fun way to replicate like a Hollywood style trailer that you'd see online or in the theater. For right now, we're not really going to worry about that. We're going to cover trailers at a later date. For right now, let's focus on a movie. And now we're in. Now, of course, there are a bunch of things that we can cover here. You can obviously see there's a bunch of different options that we have here. We're going to cover those at a later date. For right now, let's just focus on the bare essentials. Now, of course, the first thing to making any video project is your media. That can include pictures, that can include video, and that can even include audio. If you're using iCloud Photo Library, or at least the built-in Photos app on your Mac, you can actually go over to the Library section, hit Photos, and import your photos and videos from any particular album that you have. Or you can select it by going to a particular album, anything that someone has shared with you through iCloud, or just look through all the photos and videos that you have available. We're going to show you the other way in a moment, but I'm also going to show you that you can do the same thing with audio. If you go up to the Audio tab here, the default section is your music library. This is through iTunes or your music app, depending on which version of macOS you're using. And this will include anything that's in your music library. So this can include podcasts, audio that you've created, or anything you've bought or saved into iTunes. You have to be careful when using anything you've bought from iTunes or anyone else's music, because if you're going to say be using this for YouTube, you have to make sure that you have the proper copyright and the proper licenses to do these things. iMovie also includes a bunch of sound effects that come with it through GarageBand, as well as actually any projects that you've done through GarageBand. So you have quite a few options here. Now going back to My Media, now you may have media files that are from other sources. They may not be stored in iCloud or Photos or iTunes. You may in fact have audio that you've recorded on your own, or from an external camera, or even from a cloud storage provider like Dropbox or Google Drive. You can actually still import those media items into iMovie to use, either by hitting this button up here, by going to the File menu and hitting Import Media, and you can also just hit the big Import Media button in the center here. When you click on this, you'll be sent to the Finder menu so that you can navigate and find your files to import them into iMovie. You're going to want to make sure that you have a pretty good organization system. If this is really just a one-time use of iMovie, maybe it's not a big deal. But if you're going to use iMovie regularly or any media editing project, you're going to want to make sure that you have a good system for organizing your media. So for example, I am in my external drive, and I'm in this folder where I keep all the raw footage for any of the videos that I'm making for YouTube. And you can see I've got the folders organizing them. So if I say go into the switch controllers, I even have I have folders, for video and audio separately. And we're going to use this to start out with, just to kind of start getting a feel and building this video, like what I've used for my Nintendo Switch video. So you can see here, if I click on this, I've given names to each of these, and you can see the duration, when they were created, what kind of file type they are, their size, if they were 360 videos, and if they're stereoscopic, among plenty of other things. So for right now, let's start off with some of the early stuff. So we're going to start off with a couple of these. You can multiple select items or multi-select items by holding down the command button and selecting them. Or you can just click on one that you want. And when you're done, you can hit the import selected button. So let's click on these two right now. Likewise, if you go back, you can also see audio as well. So if I go back here, you can see all these bits of audio that I've done. So I can hit this one, for example, actually these two, and hit import selected. And you can see now, here's kind of what videos versus audio looks like. If you import pictures that look more like the video, it just won't move as much, which I'll show you in just a second. Now, when you import media, it's going to be organized based off the date that the media was created, not when you imported it, but when it was actually recorded. So you see that these videos and these pieces of audio were actually created on February 29th. Now you can actually preview much of these by hovering over, and you can see the right-hand side over here. You can actually see, as I hover over, you'll see a kind of preview. You can see like my hand moving and stuff. Likewise, you can click on it and hit either the play button in the bottom right-hand corner here, or hit the space bar to actually start playing it.
What's up? This is EasyOSX, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to connect a Nintendo Switch Pro controller.
So you get the idea. Audio works as well. So while you won't see anything, you can actually hover over it and hit the space bar or the play button to play it back.
What's up? This is EasyOSX, and in this video...
Now you'll notice, of course, in this one instead, you actually see these kind of jagged lines. This is actually the audio as it spikes up and down based off my speaking or whatever audio or sound is coming through. So this kind of also gives you an idea. It's like, okay, this was me syncing from the snap, this is the silence I had, and then this is when I started speaking. Now, before we go on to creating a video, I want to show you a couple more options in this media window. So you can actually change how you view things to a certain degree. So you'll see this all clips here. If I click on it, I have the option to change my view to hiding rejected videos or media, showing only favorites, and showing only rejected ones. And what does that mean? Well, you'll notice the heart and the X icon next to these, next to the play button. You can also get these if you right-click on an item, and you'll see favorite and reject. So basically, these are certain ways to say, yes, I really want this piece of media, or no, you know what, this is a bad cut, bad take, I don't want to use it. And it's a quick way to kind of visualize it. So for example, if I mark this as rejected, you'll see a red line that pops up here. Likewise, if I hit favorite, it adds a green line. So this is a quick way to see, what's good and what's bad. So if I say hide rejected, it's going to leave my favorites and it's going to leave anything that's unrated, but it took out that one rejected. Likewise, if I say only show favorites, it only shows that one that I favored, etc. And if you make a mistake, you can of course right click and hit unrate, and you'll see that the item went away. Now, on to the fun stuff. Let's talk about how you actually start creating your video. So as you can see down here, it says drag and drop video clips and photos, etc. So this is actually your timeline. This is how you start putting your media together. Pretty simple. You can actually select a whole video or just part of a video and drag it down here to the timeline. So for example, if I want to add this entire thing, I'm gonna add this, drag it down here, and drop it in, and now it's in the timeline. And of course, if I have my cursor down here, you can see it does the same sort of preview thing up here. Likewise, I can, just as before, hit the play button or the space button and start playing this video in the timeline. And you may notice the video is a little laggy. That's mainly because it's doing some processing in the background, and later that'll clear up. Now, if you want to see more or less of what's on your timeline, you can actually use the Command plus and Command minus keys, as you can see here, to zoom in or out. You can also use the slider here on the right-hand side to do the exact same thing. And then you can use the scroll bar on the very bottom of the screen to scroll across the timeline. Now, if you want to add further clips, for example, I want to add this video clip, I can actually drag it in here behind or before it, and you can see the little blue line that pops up there. You can also add it on top but we'll talk about that at a later time. Now you'll notice in the timeline, the video is taking up only the center section. There's nothing really above or below it. If you add certain, say, like pictures or videos on top, you'll see them on a layer above, and audio will go below it. You can kind of get an idea with this if you see that the video, the actual video of this, is on the top level, and the audio below it with all its waveforms is on the bottom. If I want to add a separate audio track, I can drag it down here, and you see this kind of green line that's connecting it. And this bonds the, or connects, I should say, the video and the audio together, this external one. Likewise, if you have, say, external music that you want to play, like background music, you can kind of just down here see this little music icon. And that is where you'll have that external music, that background music, I should say. And this can be entirely separate from any audio. So if you're doing, say, narration over video, this can be separate from the background music. So if I want to play this, I'm going to hit the spacebar, start playing. Now you'll notice though,
What's up? This is EasyOSX, and in this video,
the video and the audio aren't in sync, or at least the new audio is not in sync with the old one. That's one thing you have to be careful with when you have this external audio recording. When you do this, you want to make sure that it's in sync. And the easiest way to do this, as we mentioned before, is you see the waveforms. You want to try to line up the waveforms as much as possible. One of the things that I've done is, you can see at this point, I snap. And this snap serves as a video and an audio way of syncing. It acts as a sync point. If you've ever seen a movie, for example, or anything about filming a movie, you'll notice that they sometimes take a clapper and say, take one, take two, and then clap it down and take it away. This is basically what I'm doing with the snap. So I'm going to zoom in on this point and sync them together using the snap in the audio and the snap in the video, and line them up as closely as possible. And then you can test it, of course, by playing it back. Now you'll notice, of course, the audio is not in line, or at least at the same length as the video, and that's fine. We'll take care of that in a moment. Let's make sure that it sounds okay and it's in sync.
take 4. What's up? This is EasyOSX, and
So that's pretty good. That'll do us just fine. Now, as mentioned before, the audio and the video are in sync, but they're not necessarily in line. So you can see that the audio starts much later and it ends much later. And it's also like it's longer. The audio is actually 19 seconds, whereas the video is about 16.4 seconds. On top of that, for our final product, we really don't want to have like all this dead space, the snap, me saying take 4, and all this dead space at the end. And I'll also go ahead and say we don't want it in portrait mode, particularly for what I'm showing here, but we'll worry about that in a future video. So right now, I want to make sure that I get kind of from this section right here, from where my cursor is, to about here. So how do we do that? Well, we've got a couple different ways. So one very easy way is at the very end or beginning of a video, I can actually trim it, which I just bring it in. And now this part will stop playing. The video will keep going, but the audio won't. So I can actually just kind of bring it in line. And you can't really see it, but there actually is a little bit of pull. When I get here close, the mouse doesn't necessarily keep moving. If I pull really hard, it'll jump a little bit. But if I get close, once I get kind of in line, it just stops. You have to kind of feel this out. Sometimes it's not perfect, but generally it does that. Likewise, we can do the same here, but there are a couple other ways that we can do it. So, for example, I can actually, if I hold down the R key, you see this little yellow indicator right here. This will let me select a range. So I can now click and drag across a certain section. And then I've highlighted that section, and I can do a bunch of different things with it. I can actually just delete that section, just delete it entirely by hitting the delete button, or right-clicking on it and hit delete. Now, of course, when I did that, you see that it actually deleted the audio because that was the section that the audio was tied to. If you've made a mistake, you can hit Command Z or go up to Edit and hit Undo, and you'll get whatever the last thing you did back. And of course, you can keep hitting that to get everything back, or to start going backwards each edit that you made. And if you realize that, you know what, you may have gone back too far, you can hit the Edit button and go and hit Redo or use Command-Shift-Z. I did that in range selection, and that was helpful, but the problem is, now it's not really in sync anymore. You can see that there's a snap function, and this is where the actual speaking starts, and the speaking starts here, so it's no longer in sync. So we can, of course, trim this. What we can also do is we can select the thing and right-click on where the playhead is, or where my cursor is, and hit split clip if we wanted to. So this is to break it off into two different sections. You can also do this by hitting Command B. Now you see we've actually created two different audio clips, and they're connected to two different videos. The speaking part that we wanted, it's not in sync, but it's actually bound to the second video clip that we did. And likewise, the first audio clip is bound to the first section of the video that was made when we took out that range. So if we wanted to, we could actually delete one and delete both. But of course, our audio is not in sync, so we have to kind of get it back together. So let's see if this is roughly in sync.
What's up? This is EasyOSX, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to...
So yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good in sync. Now again, this video is not a finished, polished video. I wouldn't necessarily want to upload this just yet. Of course, we said that this is in portrait when it really needs to be in horizontal or in landscape. And of course, we have two different audios. You really want just one track of audio as far as like the speaking role. But for our sake, for our demonstration purposes, let's talk about how you actually render your clip and how you make it one new movie file. So we can go up here into this share button and click on it. So we have a couple different options here for what we want to do. You have an email option in which you can render the video and then directly email it to someone. You also have some pre-made options to upload to YouTube, Facebook, and Vimeo. If you select these options, you'll be asked to link your respective accounts, YouTube, Facebook, or Vimeo, and then you can not only render the video, but then upload them directly. While this is pretty good and pretty handy, I've generally found you lose a little bit of quality when you do this compared to if you create a movie file and then upload it. But what you want to do, what you find more convenient, that is up to you. The last two options, of course, an image and a file. The image, of course, just whatever you've got highlighted, it will make a picture of it, and it's just going to be a standard JPEG image. And the last option, the one that we're going to be using, is the file option. This is your actual video. This is going to be the final video product, and you'll create a video file that you can save on your hard drive, an external drive, or upload somewhere else. So I'm going to click on that. Now you have this new window that pops up, and you have a couple different things. You have all your settings over here, which we'll get to in a second. You also have a preview window, which you can, just as in the timeline before, you can drag over.
Controller and a Nintendo Switch Joy-Con to your Mac.
So it kind of gives you the audio and the video playback. You also see it shows you how long your final movie project is as far as length, and also what size it'll take up on your hard drive based off your current settings. So speaking of those settings, up here is the title and the file name that your file will save as. So we'll say Switch Demo. And a description and tag. These are more useful for when you're looking for the looking for the movie file on your Mac. So we'll say Switch controllers. And we'll give the tags the Switch, iMovie, I can't type today, and demo. So the tags again are useful for when you're looking for a certain file on Mac. So I want to make sure that I name these tags things that are relevant either to the video or what I'm doing with the video, what the purpose of it is. So they don't have to actually be just the things in the video. They don't have to just be the things in the video, but they can also be things like if there's a particular organization. If I'm doing this for a business or a nonprofit, I can say Joe Schmo's company or such and such church, etc. You have the option to render in video and audio or just audio only. The audio only is really useful for if you want to rip a file or rip the audio out of a video that you've saved. And for example, if you want to do, let's say you have a video podcast and you want to rip out the audio, something like that. Granted, in most cases, you're probably just looking for the video and audio. If you're going to make, let's say, like a podcast, you probably want to do a dedicated audio recording application. Now, the last three options, resolution, quality, and compression, are the most technical, but they're very relevant to things like the size of the video, the quality of it, etc. And we'll go over them real quick. So resolution is you probably heard things like 720p, 480p, 1080p, 4K, and that refers to how many vertical lines are in the video. The more lines you have, the more quality that you have, the more that you can fit in the picture. So 1080p has more lines vertically than 720p, quite a few more lines, and so it will actually look better on a screen and actually scale better. So 1080p will look better on a bigger screen than, say, 720. And of course, 4K has way more lines than either 720p or 1080, and that'll have much more quality to it. And again, will also scale better on bigger screens. The downside, of course, is more quality means bigger file size. So for example, if I say I want the resolution at 540p, you'll notice the amount of storage space this file took was about 140. And if I jump it back up to 720, then the file size jumps up a little bit. Quality also affects this quite a bit. So if I drop the quality down to, say, medium, you can see the file size change quite a bit. We'll get to quality in a second. Now the 60, also I'll mention, the 60 refers to frame rate. If you record something at a high frame rate, sports, video games, for example, tend to record at higher frame rates, then you'll get this option as well. Whereas if you're recording something at standard, say 24 or 30 frames, you generally won't see the 60 option. You'll also notice that I don't have the 1080p or 4K options available. And that is something that we're going to cover later, but generally speaking, the resolution that you can output your video to is dependent on the first video that you ever add to the timeline. So if I add a 720p video as the first video to the timeline, doesn't matter what else I add, it could be 4K, it could be 1080, the rest of my video will only be able to upload or render at 720. And we'll show you how to get around that in a later video. But that's why the 4K option isn't even available, and the 1080p option is currently grayed out. Now, as mentioned, quality, this is, well, basically the quality of the video. And they have some presets, low, medium, high, and custom. And the custom, it kind of shows you like the bit rate of the video. And you can see as I adjust the slider, I get higher bit rates, but I also adjust the file size as well. I honestly just recommend just leaving it at the best, the ProRes quality. For certain things, like particularly if you're doing, say, 4K videos, this is really going to affect the file size. But generally, it's just best to leave quality at best. And then lastly, you have the compression, whether it renders it faster, but you may lose some quality, or whether it takes a little bit longer to render, but it does a better job, and you get, again, a better quality video. If you're really in a rush, go ahead and do faster. You will see a drop in quality, but again, your video comes out faster. I recommend just doing better quality. So these are kind of the recommended settings. Just set your compression to better quality, set your quality to best, and the resolution, this will depend on what kind of project you're doing. 720p is the minimum to be considered HD, so I wouldn't drop it any lower than that unless you're just desperate for a video file and trying to reduce file size. But if you can get up to 1080 is good. I would highly recommend 1080. 4K, as of 2020, 4K content is kind of still up in the air. It is becoming much more of a standard, so if you think you can get away with it, go for it. But for right now, I think at least 720, but preferably 1080. If you can get to 1080, go for it. So then we'll hit next. And then this is going to ask us where we want to save the video. I'm going to save it into this completed folder. And when I'm ready, I'm just going to hit save. And now it's rendering. Now it doesn't look like it unless you look up here and you can see this little circle. So I can click on this as well to get more detail about it. But you can see it's rendering. And now I've got a rendered video. So we can go to the Finder and see it. So I've gone to that completed folder, and you can see here that I've got this Switch demo movie. And I can double click on it. And here it is. It's fully rendered and ready to go. And then from there, you can upload it to your video service, put it on a flash drive, etc. Now jumping back to iMovie real quick, the last thing we want to do is make sure that we save this project. Of course, if you close it, iMovie will actually just go ahead and save your project in kind of a temporary location. But if you want to make sure that you've saved it properly and you want to use it in future things, you want to just hit the back button and it'll ask you, what do you want to name your project? So we'll just say, I'm going to call this iMovie tutorial because that's what we're going to be continuing to use. And hit OK. And there we go. We now have our iMovie tutorial. So now it's saved, and I can click on that, double click on it, to reopen it, and you can see it's saved by that title. So anyway, thank you again for watching this first video in the How to Use iMovie series. In future videos, we're going to start covering more like how to get that 1080p or 4K video. We're going to start showing you special effects, both audio and video, as well as how to edit certain things, such as how to make your video look better, how to rotate and crop it, things like that. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thank you again. If you like what you've seen and want more, please subscribe to the channel. And we have a lot more content coming out, both about iMovie as well as Mac and iOS stuff. And you can also check us out on our website at easyosx.net and our various social media pages. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.